Israel expands operations on the ground in Gaza into what they say is the center of gravity for Hamas, and a close call for Israeli forces who narrowly escaped before a major detonation underneath one of their camps. What's going on, everyone? Let's take a look at some updates as it relates to the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. I'm recording this at 8 a.m. Central on Thursday, December 7th, 2023. Overnight, Israel released the names and pictures of 4 of their soldiers that they say have fallen over the past few days during the ongoing fighting in and around Gaza. The Gaza Health Ministry has not updated their casualty information in the past 24 hours. The last information we have from that organization says that at least 16,248 Palestinians have so far been killed and 43,616 wounded since October 7th. The Gaza Health Ministry operating in Gaza is at the very least overseen by Hamas. So when you see that information, recognize that it's coming from one of the 2 belligerents in this conflict. Now shifting to operations on the ground, pulling up a map here put together by War Mapper on Twitter. Anytime you're looking at a map like this for an ongoing conflict, you have to recognize that what we see is at the very least 24 hours, if not more, delayed from what's actually happening on the ground. There's just a lot of operational security issues at play here. So while it looks like real time, realistically, things have moved beyond what we're able to see right now. So according to War Mapper here, it looks like the IDF has encircled Beit Lahia to the north, are closing in on Jabalia in and around Gaza City, and are advancing on Khan Yunis in the south from 2 different directions. Then pulling a report from Emmanuel Fabian on Twitter and talking about the Israeli operations, he says the IDF says that the 98th Division launched a combined attack in the area of the city of Khan Yunis against the centers of gravity of the Hamas terror organization. It says that within a few hours, the troops broke through the defenses of Hamas's Khan Yunis brigade, encircled the city, and began to maneuver deeper into it. The troops that led the offensive captured Hamas strongholds, locating weapons and intelligence materials. According to the IDF, the 98th Division troops have killed many Hamas operatives in ground combat and airstrikes, and have located around 30 tunnel shafts that have been destroyed. The IDF says their forces have reached the center of Khan Yunis and have been conducting targeted raids in the heart of the city, killing Hamas operatives and destroying the terror group's infrastructure. In one of the operations, the IDF says a weapons depot inside of a mosque was struck. Additionally, the IDF says that the Khan Yunis brigade is one of the 2 most dominant Hamas brigades, and that the city in southern Gaza is a center of gravity of the terror group. All of the leadership of the Hamas terror organization, according to the IDF, political and military, grew up in the area of the city of Khan Yunis, including Yahya Sinwar, Mohammed Sinwar, and Mohammed Daif. Now, the city is surrounded by the 98th Division. Then we got a crazy story put out on a video by an Israeli soldier here talking about how a large group of Israeli forces narrowly escaped a detonation underneath their location in Gaza. So I'll play the video here in a moment. But I think what this is in relation to, or at least enough elements of this link up with a Hamas claim earlier in the week that they were able to sneak up on an Israeli encampment, likely from underground, from some tunnel networks. They did release some videos showing that they were recording Israeli forces, 5-10 meters away without being noticed. And then Hamas said they set a bunch of explosive charges and killed or wounded upwards of 60 Israeli soldiers. But let's go ahead and play what Israel had to say about that.
We got a report from intelligence that there are some Hamas terrorists reporting, listening to them. However, they found out that they're digging tunnels, and they're reporting that these tunnels they found are right under an IDF encampment, and they can see tents and they can see tanks. After being given this report, we were given the instructions to move out of this encampment secretly and cover from the outside, Hamas not knowing that we had left, but we would be waiting for them to come. A day went by, nothing happened, and then all of a sudden another report came from the intelligence that they hear that these Hamas soldiers, terrorists, are 20 centimeters from coming out of these tunnels. And in the middle of the night, the guys noticed a figure coming out inside one of the tents where we were staying 2 days earlier. They opened fire, and as the gunfire hit him, there was an explosion, and he disappeared. And then a few seconds later, there was a massive explosion from under the ground, completely engulfing the tent and all the belongings in flames. as well as causing other openings within the encampment to cave in, revealing that there was a whole network of tunnels under the same spot that a few days earlier guys were sitting and off-duty and relaxed.
So pretty wild, right? Now, earlier in the week when I showed the video of Hamas that Hamas released from inside of the Israeli camp showing that they were there without being detected, I mentioned just how nerve-wracking it must be to operate in an environment like that. I've never had to do that, where we've had to worry that at any point directly under our feet, enemy forces could be maneuvering and setting explosive charges. So tough setup for Israeli forces to move through there. We'll have to wait and see, but I would imagine this story and kind of what was narrowly avoided here could lead to a change in Israeli tactics. Now, shifting over to the Hamas side, they claimed responsibility for more than 15 attacks in the past 24 hours, continuing to see an increase in the operational tempo on the ground from both sides. Hamas says during these attacks, they were able to completely or partially destroy 23 separate Israeli vehicles, that their snipers wounded 6 Israeli soldiers, and that they detonated a house rigged with explosives inside of which Israeli soldiers were stationed. Then in line with that, Hamas did put out footage yesterday showing what I believe are some of the first Israeli vehicles that Hamas is proving that they have destroyed since the ground operation kicked off in Gaza City. So there were a handful of Israeli vehicles and armored vehicles destroyed on October 7th, but since Israel has gone in on the ground, it's been, the claims of that Hamas has put out is well north of 100 now in terms of tanks, armored vehicles, bulldozers, military vehicles that they've destroyed. Haven't seen anywhere near that number verified by either side, really. We have seen a couple like bulldozers smoking, look to be put out of commission. But in the past 24 hours, Hamas did release some footage showing burned out, destroyed Israeli armored vehicles. Then yesterday, Hamas conducted a rocket attack from right next to a humanitarian corridor in Gaza. So Israel released this footage here as well as an infographic showing the location of this launch. These are kind of underground rocket launchers. They're easy for Hamas to hide, and we've seen through the clearance operations across Gaza, the IDF has uncovered a ton of these. Essentially, it's just kind of a hole in the ground. You can fit the rocket, move some sort of top cover, and then it's you can't see it from the sky. We've got a little video here from the aftermath of the launch, showing the smoke in the sky. And then with firefighting radar, Israel and the United States and other nations it's not that hard to pinpoint the location of where some of these launches came from. Then pulling up the infographic, kind of showing the general area where this took place. You've got the launch location right there on the right, matches with the video shown from overhead. And then a humanitarian corridor right on the other side of that berm. 50 to 100 meters away is where Israel has been asking the civilians of Gaza, to flee. And you can see some of the tents popping up in that area where the refugees, the internally displaced people, the Palestinians from across Gaza, are moving there for safety. And then 50 meters away, Hamas is actively firing rockets into Israel. Now, I have seen some pushback on the argument that Hamas is using Palestinian civilians as human shields. And what a lot of people are pointing to is when you look at any of this Hamas footage they put out, it's just fighters. It's guys carrying weapons and RPGs. There's no civilians anywhere nearby. So I've seen folks say, hey, look, that means that Hamas is waiting for the civilians to evacuate before they engage Israeli forces. Look, no military, no fighting force is ever going to release information that makes them look bad. Hamas is no different. So Israel is not going to highlight an airstrike that only killed civilians and did not kill any Hamas militants. You're not going to see Israel or any of their social media or spokespeople call that one out and really want to hammer it home. The same goes for Hamas. They're not going to distribute to the world footage of them, picking up their weapons from a mosque and then moving into a hospital and firing on Israeli forces before going back into a tunnel underneath a nearby school. It's just that doesn't help them in any way, shape, or form. So you're going to get the snippets. They make it look like a relatively clean battlefield where it's just, combatants engaging combatants. I wouldn't, we're talking about 2 minutes of footage that's released every so often over the course of like 3 to 4 days at a time. The majority of what is happening in Gaza, we are not seeing. Then shifting to the northern front, Israeli Defense Minister Gallant met with the mayors of a handful of Israeli towns in the north of Israel that have been evacuated since the fighting kicked off there. And he said the people will not be returned home until Hezbollah is driven back north of the Litani River, which it's not just made up or pulled out of thin air. That's actually in line, that requirement is in line with the UN resolution following the 2006 war, which created or designed to create a buffer between Israel and Hezbollah. Now, whether you think that resolution is accurate or not, it has not been maintained. Hezbollah is right down there on the border with Israel, within direct fire range of plenty of Israeli outposts, and that's how they're attacking most of the Israeli infrastructure, the guard post communications infrastructure, and military facilities there on the border. So Gallant said that the best solution right now is a diplomatic one, but if that doesn't succeed, then Israel is ready to act with all means available at its disposal. That has generally meant around the world, it's like code for saying the military option is not off the table. So a little bit of a threat that if Hezbollah doesn't pull back, step back to the area that they're supposed to be in since 2006, Israel might expand the war to the north. Now, this comes at a time where there have been increased strikes to the north between Israel and Hezbollah since the expiration of the Israeli ceasefire with Hamas that Hezbollah just jumped on the bandwagon with and decided to take part in. Then over the past couple days, Hezbollah has announced the death of a few more of their fighters due to Israeli strikes in the area. That brings their total losses to more than 90 since the fighting kicked off on October 7th. So it turns out Americans have a less favorable view of Hamas today than they did about a month ago, which is good. We're trending in the right direction there, right? Hamas, not good. So YouGov ran a poll with Yahoo. They interviewed 1,584 U.S. adults between November 9th and November 13th. A couple questions I thought were worth running through here. The first one, do you have a favorable or unfavorable view of Hamas? In the YouGov poll, 8% said favorable, 69% said unfavorable, and 24% said don't know. I still think that the 8% is a little high for a organization the United States recognizes as a terrorist group. But either way, that's actually a decrease since October when there was a Harvard-Harris poll, and in that they asked the same question, favorable or unfavorable. In that one, 14% said that they had a favorable view of Hamas, and 63% said unfavorable. So, in terms of the negative sentiment towards Hamas, that's increasing, I think is the way to put that. Now, both of these polls also asked about the favorability of Israel, so we'll throw that in here as well. In the YouGov poll, they said 53% held a favorable view of Israel with 22% unfavorable, which is a little bit of a negative trend from the Harvard-Harris poll in October, which had 59% favorable and 21% unfavorable. So both groups are going down. Americans looking at both Israel and Hamas have a less favorable view today than they did right around the start of the war. Then another one I wanted to highlight here, the question is, what would you prefer as it comes to U.S. actions related to this war? 41% said that they would prefer that the U.S. works to broker a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. 34% said the U.S. should support Israel as it tries to defeat Hamas. So the reason I wanted to highlight that one is the arguments for or against the ceasefire in the United States are kind of hard to dissect. It seems like the louder voices right now are calling for a ceasefire, but when you look at the movement inside of our government and our official institutions, like not much has changed there, right? Generally speaking, the U.S. government is in full step behind Israel still to this day. So I don't know if 41% is enough to change any sort of U.S. policy, because that's what this would be. It would be a change to the policy, not a continuation. If you look at this another way, between the 25% that says, I don't know, don't want to answer, not aware of the conflict, anything or not, it's not important to me, right? All of those fall into that 25% camp. So that 25% plus the 34% that say the U.S. should support Israel as it defeats Hamas, that's 59%. So 59% say keep going as is or do nothing. So, I just wonder if politicians or decision makers look at this type of information, how do they read that? Is it the 41% that jumps out, or is it the combined number of 59% that says, just keep going as is? So I wanted to give you guys an update here. Last week, I put out some applications for some positions that we were hiring for. And those are mostly filled at this point. So what we're trying to do is, because of your support with the super thanks, by joining the channel, being channel members, by joining Substack, or just watching the videos and sharing the videos is awesome at Baseline. Because of that support, we're able to take some of that money and hire people, subject matter experts in certain areas that I'm not very well versed in. So we're going to be able to tap into other areas of the world, other conflicts, other organizations, and really leverage some expertise to try to present that information here to you going forward. So thank you all very, very much. Truly, from the bottom of my heart, it's humbling to be here with you every day. And, this wouldn't exist without you. You can kind of end it there. But your support is allowing us to go out and hire some of these experts, bring in additional voices, and hopefully over time provide a higher quality product to all of you. And it's, I guess that's our way of saying thank you. So really, really appreciate it. But that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time.